So welcome to the Performance Platform webinar. Brief introduction. So for those who don't know me, I'm Jean-Paul. I'm the CEO and founder of Swisside. And Jörg, who is the lead on this project, is the head of our digital solutions. Briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, I mean, happy to be here. Happy to show you the product. My background is more biomedical engineering, but since I think almost 5 years, I'm now with Swisside. Yeah, and happy to drive the digital part of the business.
Exactly. And yeah, Jörg, and together with Seamus and a few others in the company, are responsible for all of the simulation work that we do for athletes and the World Tour teams, which actually forms the basis of what we'll present today. So we'll start with a short presentation, just to give a brief overview again of what the platform is. Jörg will do a quick demo of a few examples, and then any questions you have, you guys can ask and raise your hand anytime if you have a specific question on what we're presenting. So first and foremost, I mean, why are we doing this? Over the years, we know that there's a huge potential for athletes to be faster in time or more efficient with their energy by choosing the right equipment or by doing the right pacing strategy. And we also know that athletes often make the wrong decisions. So based on gut feeling, previous experience, a perfect example is, yeah, I've always pumped my tires up to 8 bar. This is what I do, but we know now from science that that's not the right thing to do. So athletes are making wrong decisions. It's costing them time. It's costing them speed and efficiency. And also, high quality, high powered, complex simulation tools are simply not available to amateur athletes or the public in a simplified form. As we've mentioned, you know, we've been supporting multiple World Tour teams over the last 10 years with this kind of simulation platform. They're hugely complex. They're very difficult to use. You really need to know how to use them. And so one of our goals here was to bring a simplified platform that's easy to use to jedermann, to every person and the amateur.
Yeah. Yeah, and what is it actually? I mean, it's a digital tool, and it's a digital tool that makes or helps triathletes and cyclists to be faster. It's a simulation software in a reactive web application, so you can use it mobile or on your browser or on the tablet. And it allows the athlete to simulate an event and races virtually. And on top of this simulation, it allows to make data-driven decisions around equipment choice and pacing strategy.
So yeah, I think another important thing here is it's designed not just for triathlon and time trial, but also for road stages, KOM, specific segments where an athlete might want to improve or go a bit faster. Yeah, so a brief overview on how it works. So basically, you have to input a lot of parameters on the front end, but we try and keep it as simple as possible. So there are certain unknowns. So for example, I'm sure each of you don't know what your CDA is, but luckily we've had hundreds and hundreds of athletes through the wind tunnel. We have a really good database of what's a typical CDA for riders of certain heights, male, female, certain weights. So based on this sort of information, we can already make very good estimations. Also things like rolling resistance. We know for typical tires what are typical rolling resistance numbers. So for a lot of the things which we know amateur or say normal people won't know, we provide estimations or assumptions when they can't give that information themselves.
And this was really an important design goal during development, that we make the hurdles for users as little or as little as possible. So but they don't need all the information to start with a pacing optimization, for example.
A very important part, weather, and particularly the wind, has a big impact on both pacing strategy and equipment selection. You've probably heard over the years, typically as a wheel manufacturer ourselves, the topic of sailing effect. So deeper section wheels actually can even produce thrust, pushing you forward. So that's very much dependent on the wind and has a big impact on your strategy or equipment selection. So part of the tool, again, to make it as simple as possible, you enter the location of your race and it will automatically fetch the weather, wind for the time of your race, even in the future. It can actually also work retrospectively if you want to re-simulate your race after you've done. Then you can do actually what the point is of the tool, which is to simulate different setups, to figure out what's the best setup for a particular race or event. And of course, you can run an optimization to optimize your power pacing strategy over that particular event. A very important part of the tool is, we've always said, for example, when we bring athletes to the wind tunnel, the goal is that they learn. We don't just give them answers, we teach them why certain things are happening so they're empowered to make better decisions in the future. So a key part of this tool that we've developed was really a learning. So once you get presented the results of your simulation, we have some insights and learnings that presented as part of the results, so that the athlete really understands why their choices or why the presented solution is faster, so that they're learning from it, so that we're improving their gut feeling for the future as well. Yeah, maybe a little bit of the background. Our goals again were to enable data-based decision-making in a simple form. I mentioned earlier we've been doing simulations dating back to 2014. I mean, we started very early working with Team Sky, which then became Team Ineos, doing simulation pacing strategies, firstly primarily for time trials, then in the future, then further on for team time trials, and then ultimately also in actual stages, particularly where there are important segments, for example, a climb to the finish, where it will be very decisive for the result of the stage. The simulation can be very well used for that. And since 2024, we've of course been the major technical partner of the Decathlon World Pro Tour team, and so we built a specific platform also for them, which is actually the basis of this platform here that we also make available to the public. Again, coming back to the goals, one of the key things is reducing uncertainty, increasing confidence. So as an athlete going into a race, it's also a huge advantage that you have the best setup for your race, you have the right pacing strategy, how to best use your power. And we know also from the World Tour that this psychological effect, when the riders feel better prepared, they've got a better chance of executing a good race and achieving a better result. And as we already mentioned, the final part of the goal is to educate the user to also enable them to make better decisions in the future, even without a platform.
So the first major use case of the platform is equipment selection. So here you see the results, or some of the results, of a 180-kilometer triathlon race, namely the Ironman Nice race with approximately 2,500 meters of climbing.
And I think this is a really good example, because maybe today we take it for granted that a time trial bike is best for Ironman Nice. But I can tell you all, going back a few years, we had every professional athlete that we supported, as well as some key brands, asking the question, do we go with an aero road bike or do we go with a triathlon bike? And we went into the wind tunnel with people like Patrick Lung and Laura Philipp at the time, with an aero road bike with triathlon extensions on, making measurements also with the TT bike to find out what is the fastest setup. And we used, of course, our simulation platform, which was at the time an in-house platform only, for determining what is the fastest setup. So back then, it really was unknown what is actually faster. And by using this kind of simulation platform, you can really determine what's the fastest setup before you put your foot on the, or your wheels on that race course.
Yeah, and here you see, like, you get in one view, you get the overview of which is the fastest setup overall, but it also gives you more detailed overview about the segment. So which segment you lose time and which segment you make up time. And in this particular case, it's, I mean, the more aero setup is faster in every segment or every segment type. But as you see, the biggest advantage is on flat sections with headwind, which makes sense because there you really profit from a more aero setup, but you don't lose a lot of time in the steep climbs, for example.
And I think this is a really important one because instinctively you think, oh yeah, I would be fast, I would be a lot faster on the steep climb on the road bike because it's 1.5, 2 kilos lighter. It's more efficient for climbing and whatever. But actually we see from a pure physics point of view, the difference is only 2.6 seconds on this almost 10-kilometer long segment, which is very, very small. But then of course you're winning minutes everywhere else. So ultimately the result that we see here, which is 8 minutes 40 seconds, simulated here, gives you a clear indication, without a doubt, you'll be faster with a triathlon setup.
And it provides you also a graph to somehow show this. I mean, how you lose time with the more with the lighter setup over like the course compared to the more aero fastest setup. So you really see here again, like in the flat parts, you will lose a lot of time, and then in the climbs a little bit less. Yeah, gives you a good indication. So actually the second use case is pacing strategy optimization. Here you see an example of a World Tour cycling stage, not of the entire stage, but only of the last 40 Ks.
And I think this is a good example in the type of work we've been doing over the last 10 years, often with the World Tour teams, obviously simulating an entire World Tour stage doesn't really make sense because you don't know what the dynamic is going to be of the race, what's going to happen. But every team goes into the race with a strategy for each of their key riders. And in particular, it's often the case that a key segment of the stage will be identified as the strategically most important segment. And then certain key riders will be given a role, a job to pace the lead rider up the hill. And so typically in this example, this was a key segment of the stage where the team said they're going to attack with a group of riders, and particularly for the lead rider who should break away, they wanted a clear pacing strategy on this segment of the race. And this can be something that's typically applicable to a Gran Fondo if you're riding by yourself, or if you're a KOM hunter wanting to go and set your best time, or even a KOM segment on a particular climb, you can come and simulate just a segment of a course.
Yeah. And again, it gives you a summary. So with the time you save by following an optimized pacing strategy, it gives you a segment by segment pacing strategy with the relative numbers to a constant power strategy. And it also gives you some indication, and there it's like the learning we speak about, what is important to focus in each segment. So on the fast segments, it tends to be aero, and in the climbs, it tends to be more important to concentrate on power.
Exactly. And we can see here the difference if we go to the results table, the difference over this 37-kilometer stage seems small, 26 seconds. but of course based on quite a high normalized power. So this is really a pro rider, 371 watts normalized power in this case, or a sort of a high level rider. But of course, a 26-second benefit in such races is actually quite important. Yeah.
And then one key concept is grouping, and as you might know from other tools, it gets really unhandy if you have a high number of segments. So if you have to somehow memorize or learn from 20 more segments what your pacing strategy is, it's really hard to memorize, hard to action. And there we have the grouping function, auto grouping function, which reduces complexity and increases the usefulness of the results by grouping those segments into different groups, so that you then have only like a handful or maximum 9 groups that defines the pacing strategy, as shown on the right side here.
And I think an important part of this as well is also when you get presented this final grouped results page, you can see very clearly that there's overpower segments and underpower segments. And typically, you know, we all know you can't be accurate to within 1 watt or 2 watts, and it's actually quite unimportant in that case. But here you can see, for example, for this particular case, overpowering around 10 watts on the climbs, steep climbs and the normal climbs, and underpowering 5 to 10 watts on some of the flatter sections is pretty much what the strategy is. So, and only on the false flat descent, even an underpower of 21 watts, quite a lot, where you can really recover, hydrate, take your nutrition on. It actually becomes quite simple to execute in the race because you have, let's say, 3 target powers: an overpower of 10 watts, an underpower of 5 watts, or a big underpower of 20 odd watts on the various segments. So these 3 or 4 power targets are quite easy for you to memorize and then implement in your actual race strategy.
Maybe just jump in, because it's also an important concept, is the difference between pedaling power and average power. And here, for example, in this descent, you see that the pedaling power, which is indicated by the bar, is quite different than the average power. And that this is just probably mainly because of coasting, because the rider runs out of gears. So the average power is actually lower. So here you already see a bit, I mean, it probably doesn't make sense to focus too much on pedaling power there, because it's then dependent on, can you even pedal, or you're on the edge between being able to pedal or not. So it's better to focus on aero and to have a good aero position.
Yeah, I think, you know, key question is, you know, what differentiates our platform to, I mean, there's not a lot of options on the market. So I think, you know, we've invested a lot of time for the usability of the results. So providing these understandable results that can be easily implemented in a race situation, like the auto grouping function, which just makes it more digestible. The complexity is key. I mean, with the pro level tools that we use for the World Tour teams, we see these are highly complex tools. So we took kind of the Apple iPhone approach, which is how do we simplify, make decisions for the user as much as possible to make it a very easy to use tool, whilst being complex enough to deliver accurate and useful results. So the tool actually does the same, use the same high-powered, very complex simulation engine that we use in the World Tour, but we simplify a lot of things to make it easy for the easy to drive, so to speak. We make the necessary assumptions for the user to ensure that we still give robust results, which give a clear tendency what to do to be faster or to choose the right equipment. And again, as we mentioned before, focus on education. I mean, our approach is empower the athlete through learning. So that way also in the future, they can they can make more informed decisions themselves through the learnings they get from the platform. And I think, as well, a key thing that differentiates us and our platform is our understanding of the equipment. Because we developed at Swisside, we develop equipment for the entire cycling industry, literally from head to tire. So we're developing helmets, we're developing bike frames. Of course, we have our own wheels, we're developing tires. We really understand the function and the effects of equipment, the effects of aero versus weight under different conditions. And we've also got a database of literally tens and thousands of wind tunnel runs where we can base our knowledge on. So all of this information and our built-up knowledge is integrated into this simulation engine to provide the highest quality results to the user.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of feedback. I think probably the best example here is Laura Philipp and Philipp Seip. So we've been doing the pacing strategies for Laura for the last 3 years. And particularly the topic Ironman Nice, we mentioned it before in the presentation. This topic, road bike or TT bike, we started there with Laura, and also, of course, 1 year after the men, so we had a little bit more knowledge already. And then we did a lot of work with Laura on understanding how she rides the course to optimize the input parameters for her. As a particular example, in Ironman Nice in 2024, Laura's simulation was within a few seconds of her race time, and her power execution of the power pacing strategy was also accurate to within 1 watt when we replayed it. So this is, of course, in a certain way, a lucky punch, but it showed she was able to execute the strategy, and it certainly contributed to helping her win the World Championship in that year. Also with both Laura and Sam Laidlow for Challenge Roth in 2025, we did a lot of work with both athletes on simulation, and certainly contributed to their wins and their times in those races. So yeah, both these athletes have been very, very satisfied with what our platform can do. And of course, now we hope that the amateur athlete can also make use of the platform just like the pros do.